Good morning and welcome to Cup of Joe. Hi, I'm Joe Greer. I'm the Dean at the Roseman University College of Medicine. I'm also the host of Cuba Pete, which is taking a summer break, like the rest of Las Vegas.
They call me Cuba Pete. I'm the king of the rumba beat. When I play the maracas, I go chick chicky boom, chick chicky boom. Hey!
Well, welcome to Cuba Pete, not a laughing matter. Today we have an incredible guest, Councilman Cedric Crear. I think we're related, Crear, because I think
Somewhere along the way.
Somewhere along the
We're
line.
all related.
We're all
Somewhere along the way.
related.
Yes,
That's
we
true.
are.
That's
No
true.
doubt.
He's been a councilman here in the city of Las Vegas since 2018?
2018, April 18th, 2018.
2018. He is also a star tennis player who went to Howard on a tennis scholarship, having won many tournaments there and division, if I'm not mistaken.
We
correct?
have, yeah, won a couple of conference championships, but I used to be pretty good at tennis.
Did you?
Yeah.
I used to be pretty good at walking.
Yeah.
And that's all changed.
The old days when you didn't wake up with no aching pain anywhere along the way, no back, no nothing, was the good old days.
Right.
And we have Dr. Cheryl Brewster, who is our Senior Executive Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity, and the Pipeline, because the intersection here now during Black History Month is racism that exists in medicine, and not just the delivery of care, but unfortunately in the educational system to become a physician. And your father was a physician, wasn't he?
He was. You know, my father grew up in Houston, Texas. He and my mother in an area called Fifth Ward. If you're familiar with Fifth
You're the
Ward.
Fifth Ward, aren't you?
It's,
But I know the Fifth Ward in Houston, yeah.
So ours is Ward 5 right here. There's
Well,
just Fifth Ward, but
okay,
it's the exact same thing. But he grew up in Fifth Ward, which was a tough part of town, and it still somewhat is. Third Ward in Houston is another tough one, but Fifth Ward is a tough one. And my parents grew up there. My mother grew up in a shotgun house over off of Breckenridge, and my father grew up in a good home. His mother was an educator. My grandfather worked as a longshoreman in Houston, so he grew up in an environment of education. But he went to medical school, and he graduated from Prairie View A&M College outside of Houston. He did not get accepted to medical school because at that time, keep in mind, it was very segregated. Hence, you only got accepted to medical schools that were HBCUs at that time. And so he went down to Meharry down in Nashville, and he got a master's degree there. He worked it, and he continued to really want to be a physician. And then he was the first Black student admitted to University of California, Irvine's medical school.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. And so he went to UC Irvine Medical School. He and another guy named Dr. Cotton, who I became friends with over the years. And how he got to Las Vegas is that the first Black doctor in the state of Nevada, Dr. Charles I. West, heard about my father in California, and he tracked him down. You know, there was no emails, and there was no, hit me on my Twitter handle. He tracked him down literally and asked him to come out and help him with his practice here in Las Vegas. And he came out in the mid-'60s, right as they were desegregating the city because they signed the Moulin Rouge Agreement back in 1960 to segregate the city. And he helped him with his practice. His first practice was over in the historic West Side, which was next to the Moulin Rouge site, which is now demolished, and we're looking to rehabilitate that. But right next to there, and he serviced the Black community. And the significance of that is that you could only go to restaurants, you could only go to stores if you were Black in the historic West Side. And he serviced that community. And in essence, I like to think my father was a country doctor in the middle of the city because he had a bag at the house.
Mm-hmm.
He did house calls.
Wow.
He delivered a baby. You know, how about a lady who came in front of the city council this past week, sent me an email saying that, your father delivered all my siblings and myself.
Wow.
So family practitioner was also gynecologist. He was an obstetrician.
Yep.
He was a dermatologist. He was everything back in the day.
Yeah.
So I'm really blessed to have a legacy like that
Awesome.
in my life.
Well,
That's a great story.
I don't know if your parents are not alive or not, but
They
they'd
passed.
be. Oh, I'm sorry. But they'd be incredibly proud of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because
Thank you.
Because what you're doing, and I'm saying this as a physician, is doing things to make people healthy. We intervene
Yeah.
when they are sick.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think what's happening too is, and I'm not a physician. My mother was a physician. She didn't have a medical degree, but as a wife of a physician, she was most definitely.
She was a
As
physician.
mother,
She was
as a
most
mother.
definitely a doctor, tenured professor,
Right.
MD.
I love it.
But I am not, but I can tell you that we're trying to look at issues and look at problems and try to solve them. And as we came into COVID and coming out of COVID, we saw that there was a higher proportion of African Americans and Latinos that contracted COVID at a higher percentage than others. And so what are we going to do about that? And so
Right.
there is an issue that we have to address. And I'm in a position to try to effectuate some change to make that happen.
And listen, you are.
Yeah.
And as a physician who our educational system at Roseman is going to be based on the social determinants of health, because that's the cause of 80 to 90% of diseases.
Yeah.
As we've stated before, your zip code is more important than your genetic code for survival in this country right now. And that's one of the saddest comments you can make about an advanced industrial society.
So let's talk about what you're doing over in the historic West Side with
Yeah,
the 100 Plan.
the 100 Plan.
You know, we all know it's posted on the website, so if you have any questions, you can definitely go to the website and see all of the logistics worked out. But for those of us that haven't had a chance to take a look, give us a little synopsis. In particular, talk about the health center
Sure.
and the ideas you have around that.
So, as a product of our community, you know, I live in a house that I grew up in, born and raised. I have been a part of a discussion of how do we revitalize the historic West Side.
Right.
And we come, we meet, we talk. There's a plan, and nothing happens. And so when I came into office on April 18th of 2018, I vowed to not let that happen again. And I walk into City Hall. We had something called the 100 Plan that I had participated in to create. And the environment was this. I had to ask our director of planning, so can you send me a copy of the 100 Plan? And his response was, well, I know it's around here someplace. let me find it and send it over to you. And that's where we were. So that's where we're starting. And I said, okay, let's get it, let's dust it off, let's look at it, let's revitalize it, let's update it. And we did that. And the first year, I literally had to get people on the same page with what we're doing. And that took a while to just get staff and get everybody in the building to understand that the 100 Plan is something that we're going to execute on. And the 100 Plan it's not a 100-year plan, which many people think. It's the 100 Plan, which is historic urban neighborhood redevelopment.
Right.
And it's a comprehensive strategy that is going to look at all aspects of a community and how do we make it better.
Right.
So in my ward, I walk in and there's 15% unemployment. We have the revitalization of the historic West Side, the core. And then we also house half the homeless population that lives in Las Vegas, and all the social services for homeless is there. So our plan is looking at a number of heavy lifts. We started out with workforce development. We got to get people ready, trained, prepared to go to work. We have that. Culturally, we have it. And then as the 100 Plan is a living, breathing document, we've updated it since then to include a healthcare facility. And we've taken this plan and then we created the 100 Plan in action, which is definable goals, which are definable timelines that says, how are we gonna do it, when are we gonna do it, when's it gonna get done? And I literally just went on the road, hence our outreach to Roseman to say, hey, this is what we have going on. We would love for you to be a part of it. And I will tell you this, you guys blew me away with one, your response, with your timeliness in your response, and having a plan already in place to execute on the things that we're talking about, all right? And so our healthcare facility we're looking to build right in the core of the community is not a facility where if you're sick, if you have a cold, you go to like a UMC Quick Care. It is a holistic approach to addressing the disparities in healthcare within our community. All right, so we're looking to go in and to teach people about better eating, exercise, medications. How do you make a community better? And all those things are going to look at the pre-existing conditions you may have: high blood pressure, hypertension,
all
other
the
aspects,
disparities,
all the disparities that we
all
know about.
Well, let me
right.
tell you our ulterior motive.
Yeah.
We hope to get students from there.
Well, you know what? I think
So
that'd be fantastic.
yeah.
That is what we're looking
That's
for.
one of the
Well,
goals.
okay.
We find that first-generation college students
Yep.
are driven. They are excellent, and in this country, we throw away talent by pricing them out of
We
the
do. We price it out, but I have a degree in microbiology. I have a minor in chemistry. I was going to try to follow in my
You
father's.
wanna go to med school?
I was thinking about going to medical school. I was not even thinking about it. I was going to medical school. But I didn't want it bad enough.
Right.
Right? I mean, you really have to, it has to be ingraining. And I know people that I sat at Howard with in my zoology and micro classes and GChem and
They lived
PChem
and
classes.
breathed all that stuff.
You could feel it within them.
Yeah.
This is what they wanted to do, and this is what they did. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so I said, let me try another route. But I will say that there's so many students that have a passion for healthcare
Right.
and for making things better.
And that's one of the things we're trying to
Yeah.
do, build those pathways for those students that might not otherwise even think that this is an option
Because
because they
when-
don't see people that look
Sure.
like them.
As a university, when we go into a community, we go in perpetuity. We don't go grant-driven. This is part of our curriculum. And it becomes really, really important to do that because we're not going to be community engaged. We want to be community dependent. We want them to know that those in the community, you're going to be teaching our students.
Right.
And one of the things that we're developing too for the community and the community centers as well as the households that we're going to take care of is why can't they get a faculty appointment?
Sure. Well, it's interesting you say that because for almost 12 years, I was a regent for the Nevada System of Higher Education, which oversaw trustee for all of our 8 higher education institutions, our 2 research institutions, UNLV and UNR. I like to think I helped in bringing UNLV medicine into Southern Nevada because we desperately needed that. And so I was chair of our Culture, Diversity, and Equity Committee for a number of years, and I was a stickler on trying to create pipelines and opportunities, not only for students, but also for faculty as
100%.
well, right? Because I would meet with a lot of students that I grew up in my ward that would go off to school and they would say, hey, I don't see any teachers that look like
faculty
me.
that
There's
looks
no
like
faculty
me.
that look like me. And then there's disparities with the growth of faculty. When we
Yep.
hire someone on a tenure track and all of a sudden the track gets changed for that person, but it doesn't get changed for this
For
person.
the other person.
And then we went through a recession and we had a brain drain where a lot of people left because they weren't being fulfilled here
Yeah.
and they had to leave the state.
Yeah.
That's an issue. And so you guys are primed to make a difference, not
Yeah.
only in the quality of health care in Southern Nevada, but also on the pathways for students and also on the pathways for faculty to go into positions and go into research positions as well.
So the idea of equity is important,
Yeah,
right?
no doubt about it,
and,
sure.
and
And
understanding that
inclusion.
trajectory.
And inclusion, sure. Right. Look, and I think you guys have done an amazing job in the time that you've been here to establishing yourself. And the cool thing is that I think it's resonating within our community. I go out and talk about where we're going. I say I had a great call with talk with Roseman, and they go, oh yeah, they're doing good stuff over there. I've heard that a number of times. So keep up the great work.
Well, if we want to produce the future workforce, we have to be the ultimate of what we preach.
Yep.
From both professionalism, ethics, to actually reflecting what we say.
Sure.
About 5 to 6% of American medical students are Black. About 5 to 6% are Hispanic. A smaller percentage are on faculty. And the beauty of coming here to Roseman and coming here to Vegas is that we could do it right. We have a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the 6 of us that came out here, 4 out of the 6 are women. Less than 8% of senior leadership in academic medicine are women. They are the better of the 2 genders. We know that, but that's another story.
Well, with 2 daughters and a wife I've been married
Yeah,
to for 26 years, I will concur.
There you go.
Yes.
The other thing is 50% of us are African American. I'm Hispanic. 2 are foreign born. I'm including Canada, but that's close enough. That's still a foreigner. And the diversity of degrees that they bring to really be educators, to produce that future workforce, to produce the best clinicians, the most ethical, the most humble, the most compassionate. And you get that from first-generation college students.
Yeah. It's interesting you use that analogy of a blank sheet because I say that all the time, and it's a great place to be where you can take a pencil and you can take a piece of paper and you can chart out where you're going and what you want to do.
Right.
So many times we get engaged in such established institutions. In higher education is one of the most established institutions
Yeah.
you're ever going to find. We're talking about, centuries of the way that we've always done it.
They
it's
are
ingrained.
battleships in a swimming pool. They don't move.
Yes, it's very, very ingrained in how things work.
Yeah.
And I say that what we're doing is that we're changing the course of the river. So the river is moving east to west. We're going to dam it up, and we're going to stop it, and we're going to go,
Make a hard right.
the other way. Make a hard right.
Make a hard right.
And that doesn't happen easily in government, and it definitely doesn't happen easily in higher education. So I applaud you even having that mentality to say, how do we shift the paradigm?
And coming out here to Southern Nevada, we don't have the anchors of tradition that you have on the East Coast. Let me ask you a question. What can we do as educators in our curriculum that you would recommend to us to produce the type of physician we need for this area?
I think a lot of it is outreach, and a lot of it is getting into the schools and getting into the students at an early age. I had my kids used to go to Agassiz School, and we did a college trip, and when we were in third grade, fourth grade, and took kids on a college tour. And I was a chaperone on 2 trips to DC, and I also went to Atlanta. And so we took the kids and we went to, Morris Brown, went to Spelman, went to Clark, went to Morehouse, and saw the schools. And there was a discussion out there saying that, well, why are you taking the kids so early there? But I can tell you that the impact that it makes of getting a kid on campus, of seeing that, carries through them throughout the course of their entire life.
It does.
They will always know that they were on Morehouse's campus and saw Spelman and took a picture on the, right on the yard, and it instilled in me the importance of it. I'm in a position. My wife is an environmental biologist, and I'm a politician now, I guess. Yeah, I'm hesitant to always say that.
It's not a dirty word. It's not a dirty word.
I never considered myself a politician until I got in City Hall, but I am a politician.
Right.
Because I deal in politics. But everywhere that we travel, I take my kids to a college campus. My wife's from New Orleans. I'll take them on to Xavier. I'll take them to whatever. I buy them a T-shirt.
Yep.
And I instill in them. And so, my kids walk around the house with a Temple T-shirt on. They walk around with, University of North Carolina shorts on. And it just gets them in the mindset of that.
Yeah,
and I think that
definitely.
That is probably the best thing that can be done. And being engaged, legitimately being engaged, where you sincerely care and trying to help them find pathways. Because there's so many obstacles for young kids nowadays.
This we know.
And the other thing that we do is we're going to send our students into the community, and not just into the community clinics, but into people's households that they're going to be responsible for taking care of with an interprofessional team, which does a lot. I mean, Lou Brewster, the other Dr. Brewster, not as senior as her, but the other Dr. Brewster, when we were doing this at our last institution, did something that was remarkable. He would have the medical student was not allowed to ask how you felt. They had to ask, what is your most urgent need? That puts in perspective to the student that maybe medicine isn't as important as we think it is. Maybe paying the rent, maybe putting food on the table, being able to buy the medications. You have to put things in perspective. I'm a gastroenterologist, and I would always hope somebody said my most urgent need, a colonoscopy, but nobody has ever said that, so I'm still waiting.
It's my father I used to joke with him. I said, Dad, how was your day? He goes, good. A lot of sick people.
There you go.
A lot of sick people today. And the irony of that, I hear what you're saying.
My daughter is a public interest lawyer. Actually, she was one of the founding attorneys for Black Lives Matter.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Yeah, and when she got into law school, and I'll brag about her, she went to Harvard. I married way up.
Hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with that.
And so I said to her, I know you like to help people. I know you're smart. I married your mother. And I said, why don't you want to be a doctor? And her first answer was actually pretty funny. She goes, Dad, when it's take your kid to work day and you're doing colonoscopy, seriously, you think that's what I want to do for a living? But her second answer was very profound. And she said, Dad, you doctors don't get it. You're doctors to people. We attorneys should be doctors for society. And that's the perspective we have to have our students see, that there's a whole society. It's just not an organ. It's just not a disease. It's not even just an individual. You have people surrounding you.
Yeah, the medical profession is changed so much. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, but just from my little perspective, people say to me all the time, your father was my doctor. And I said, yeah, he was my doctor too. When I got sick, I'd come home and say, Dad, I'm not feeling good. He'd take care of me. And then when he passed, I had to go out and find a doctor.
A doctor.
Literally. And I knew I'd go to my father's friends, and and it's just though, how do you make people feel as though in today's medical profession that physicians and the industry cares about them, right? It's gotten to a point. I guess it's gotten to a point though where you are a number on a chart. You schedule at 9:08, 9:16, and you just come in,
Right.
Instead of
We have to instill it from the day they walk into medical school. And it has to be done by example. We're preparing the future workforce. Medicine is going to change drastically in the next decade or more, both from technology to delivery systems and all these things. But we have such an embarrassing problem of disparities. A report came out from the government today that the life expectancy in America dropped by 1 year in 2020.
Is that right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Not only that, since 2017, the life expectancy has been dropping, the only industrialized nation to do that. We have to sit back and say, this is embarrassing. This is really wrong. And it's just not a matter of diagnosing and treating, it's prevention.
Yeah.
It's giving people the opportunity for health, not intervention.
Yeah, and that's what we want to try to accomplish, what we will accomplish
Yes.
with our health outreach facility that's
Right.
going to go on the Historic West Side, specifically that. And I think that people really need to feel as though that people care about them, and that going to the physician is not just going, really, like you said, just for your ailment.
Right.
I mean, they're going to sometimes talk it out, to work it out,
Yep.
to get themselves mentally right.
Yeah.
Even simple things. A patient needs to be engaged from the second they walk in.
Yeah.
I'm going to expect all our clinicians from Roseman to go out in the waiting room and get their own patient.
Is that right?
Yes, because that's a simple courtesy to an individual.
Yeah.
And when I had my practice, not only would I do that, I would never introduce myself as Dr. Crear. I'd introduce myself as Joe Crear because I wasn't giving the other person a title. And what happens in modern society is the patient thinks we're so rushed, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
But if you make them feel comfortable, they give you the story, and the story gives you the diagnosis, and the diagnosis then lets you, do what you need to do to make them feel better.
Yeah, there's something to it though that has to get more personal when it comes to medicine. And,
It's a different culture.
It's a different culture.
It's creating a different culture.
I've called doctor's office and requested to speak with the doctor, and I've said, look, I'm sure the doctor's busy. I'm not saying I need to speak with him right this second, but I'd appreciate the doctor coming back.
Right.
And they transfer me to the office manager. Office manager says, the doctor doesn't talk to patients. And I was like floored that you would even, at least it was honest.
Yes.
At least it was honest.
Right.
The doctor doesn't talk to patients.
On the phone.
On the phone. You come in, make an appointment, you can,
Because they can bill.
well, they can bill, but and I also think that and I always say this too, and I'm not saying I am above the reproach or whatever, but if it's happening to me and it's happening to people that I know who are not necessarily going to settle down and just going to take no for an answer. There's a lot of people, okay, well, I guess I'll never talk to my doctor. Instead of saying, no, hold on, are you really educated enough to kind of push the envelope a little bit? It's happening along the way for so many other people.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our, the challenge of the full professorship. If it's happening to deans or happening to other high-profile people within the system,
Right.
then what's going on with the person
With
that
the
doesn't
person
have a
that doesn't
voice,
have
and doesn't
access
have a
to the
platform.
resources.
Yeah, doesn't
Yeah.
have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
They're completely just out of the loop.
They're ignored oftentimes, and we have to make sure we're addressing all of their needs at these multiple levels. And I think it kind of goes back to how we train our physicians and how we, as we used to say, bring them up.
Yeah.
Right? And we got to start earlier. We have to start introducing the concept of, any health profession and get that instilled in them at that early age.
Yeah.
It also
Create a
comes into our
culture.
admission criteria. We
Yeah.
we tend to admit students that in medicine that have not really mastered their social skills.
Yeah.
So we actually have to teach motivational interviewing. Getting students that can already communicate with somebody makes a big, big difference.
Well, it's also the traditional way that students got accepted were metrics
Sure.
and metrics alone, right? And
Metrics that had nothing to do with what kind of doctor
Yeah.
you're going to
right.
be, by the
And
way.
so now we're talking about what are the attributes that make a good doctor? How can we do what is called a holistic review on an applicant when what is it? Did they have to work while they were were they supporting their family? You know, what are the things that they had to do in order to be successful with this process? And so we're finding first-gen students, there's a level of resilience that they have. Like if they get a bad grade, they bounce back. Whereas the A student gets a bad grade, we got to put them on beta blockers and they're all depressed and they can't figure out what do I do with a B?
Right.
It's not an A, I don't know.
Right.
I've never seen this foreign thing in my life. So, you know, you're talking about getting a group of students that already know how to multitask, have that built-in resilience because they've had to fight their way to where they got.
Sure.
And they know how to communicate because they have to ask for things. They're not given those things. And so those are the students that we are seeking at our institution. And we've always thought from our last institution, and you know, and Joe can cite those stats, you know.
75% of our students at our last institution only got into our institution.
Yeah.
55% were African American or Hispanic. It's only about 10% in the rest of the country. 1/3 were first generation college. Every single graduating class we had the highest step scores. That's like the boards of any school in the state of Florida. That's 8 universities, dating back to 1956 with the University of Miami. We kicked their butts with students that they wouldn't even interview.
Wouldn't take them.
And so that, and the other thing we want to tell the Las Vegans is, we want you guys to apply to medical school.
Yeah.
Because
Just not yet.
Just
Joe.
not yet.
Not
Not
yet.
In a few years when we
Give us a few years.
Because you only have about 500 students a year from the state applying to medical school.
Yeah. And then we, the challenge that we're faced also with expanding graduate medical education, expanding
Yes.
GME within the state,
We
so the
need-
physicians stay within
so
the
they
state.
stay here.
That's vitally important.
That's-
we have to move that needle so when they get in,
They stay.
Well, you know,
we stay.
one of the things they could do is, you have these systems here, large not-for-profit systems, renowned, Intermountain, things of that nature that are always recruiting for doctors.
Yeah.
Whereas if they could turn around and say primary doctors, why don't we give scholarships to these kids? And then they have to, like if the military pays for you, they go within the system, they train them, you know what, people
Right.
will stay. But we also find that first generation college students tend to want to come back home.
Yeah, that's good to know. I know that it was a challenge when I was on the Board of Regents. We had one medical school, public medical school, University of Nevada School of Medicine, and they graduated 55 students a year. Many of those were leaving the state to go do their residencies elsewhere. And look, if you're doing orthopedics and you're going to Johns Hopkins, and look, you're going to Johns Hopkins,
Yeah.
Right.
But if you're going to Arizona to go do something else, then that's a different story.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge. In 2006, there was a great study. I'm not sure if you guys have taken a look at it, and I'll send it to you. It was the Governor Gwynn at the time put out a call because we were at DEFCON 10 in terms of healthcare in the state. And he convened a commission headed up by Don Snyder, who was a banker who ran the Fremont Street Experience. And they created this report they submitted to the legislature. And the report talked about that we were at 48th, 49th number of physicians per 100,000 population, nurses 48th, 49th, mortality rate was much higher. GME was when needed. And our licensure rate for physicians for the state of Nevada was much greater than it was, I guess, in other states. And so we were at DEFCON 10.
And the process to get
The process was much greater than it was in other parts of the state. So it was hindering. Oh, and also our insurance rates were a lot higher for malpractice services, greatly higher. And so all those factors of why we can't keep physicians and why we're at the bottom. And I would beg to say if we've moved that needle from 2006 to where we are
haven't.
now on those key metrics.
So
And
so
what-
right now we are still 47th with healthcare professionals. And so we see this as an opportunity, right? To move that needle, right? By getting those students that would not normally attend medical school,
Including
right? Moving that needle is very vital.
Dealing with a pipeline. Now, this was started a little bit before we got here at Roseman, but bringing them in the third year, after their third year in college, regardless of your undergraduate studies, that they would get a master's degree with us in science, biomedical sciences, but they would also get an undergraduate degree from this institution, CNN.
Yeah, Nevada State College.
Or any one of these. And that does a couple things. We know from Cheryl that if you can maintain a 2.8 average or above, and you go to a graduate school, you'll do very well in medical school. We'll get you there. The whole idea is we keep looking at GME and using that as a single criteria for having students physicians stay here. But first generation college does something else. It not only produces a physician, it produces an individual that can now create wealth for their family.
Right.
Whether the wealth is owning a house or paying for your kids' college, whatever it is, that becomes really important. And they become that member of that family that can open the doors for others. My father's the first one to finish high school in our family. And his granddaughter went to Harvard. Not me.
Right.
Okay?
You did okay.
I did all right. And it's that education and those opportunities, like what your father did.
Yeah.
That allow it for you, for your kids.
Sure.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because I always say that the work that we're doing, if I could change your life, it changes your family's life and it changes your community's life.
Yep.
And so you're spot on that. And I do agree with you that people will come and want to stay and raise up their families. And
this is where they grew up, and this is they want to come. And their families are so proud of them.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Well, I want to thank you, Councilman Crear. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're having fun. I know this was a great conversation. I think we have a lot of work to do out there, especially with creating these pathways for students in your area of Ward 5. I was about to say the 5th Ward again.
5th Ward?
It's in my head. It's in my head. Sorry about that. So, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And, we, are committed to working with you in your office and doing the things that need to get done to really uplift the community.
Well, I really appreciate that.
And our team, starting with Dr. Brewster, the other Dr. Brewster, Dr. Gillis, Dr. Faircloth, Dr. Esposito. By the way, she's German.
Is that right?
Yeah, you have the only school where you got a Cuban named Greer and a German named Esposito.
Esposito.
But we all came out here sight unseen.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
And we saw, I have had family here, so I knew Vegas, and everybody had been to Vegas. But we saw an opportunity here. We are very mission driven, and we're driven by social justice. As a matter of fact, in the medical school, we have a wall of social justice. And my favorite poster there is one that says, nah, Rosa Parks, 1955.
Sure. Right.
And that to me, there's so much that we need to change in our society. And if we're going to be physicians, we have to be part of that change.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's a very highly esteemed profession as well, and people look up to physicians in our community. And we have to find a way where physicians are not on a pedestal, but
we should not be on a pedestal. We should be part of the team.
Yeah.
That's why the idea of saying, what does your most urgent need, not how do you feel, really teaches humility to the students.
Yep. All right, I think we're out of time.
With that, Councilman, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you don't know the honor it has been for us to get to know you.
No, it's been a pleasure. You guys are fantastic.
And you want to shout out your...
Oh, my Alpha, 1906.
You guys, this is Cuba Pete. No laughing matter, but no matter how serious the situation is or the topics that we discuss, we have to have a smile and maybe laugh a little bit sometimes because that helps others. Thank you very much. From Studio A in Las Vegas, I'm signing out.